Last time we explored the bold first steps of macOS 10 10.0. Visually stunning and technically ambitious, it marked the beginning of a new era for the Mac, but it also came with real compromises. Performance was uneven, key features were missing, and for many users, getting serious work done still meant booting back into OS 9. Then, just 6 months later, Apple delivered macOS 10 10.1. It wasn't a reinvention, but it was a turning point. Faster, more complete, and far less fragile, 10.1 sent a clear message. With a rapidly growing library of native applications, Apple was finally in a position to do what once seemed unthinkable: begin the long goodbye to the classic macOS.
Please join me in a moment of silence as we remember our old friend, Mac OS 9.
Retrocomputing is the use of older computer hardware and software in modern times. I'm the Vintage Collector, and these are my stories. Before we get hands-on, we need to zoom out, because to understand why 10.1 mattered, we have to revisit the architecture that made this entire transition possible. Here's a simplified model showing how the system was layered. At the top, the Aqua interface we all remember, sitting above multiple application subsystems and APIs. 3 major ecosystems defined the Mac software landscape back then. Classic, which ran all the macOS apps in a virtual environment. Carbon, a bridge API that allowed developers to modernize existing Mac apps with relatively minimal effort. What's easy to forget is that Carbon wasn't just about moving apps to OS 10. With Carbon lib installed on macOS 8.6 through 9.2, developers could ship applications that ran natively on both classic macOS and macOS 10 using the same APIs. And finally, there was Cocoa, the fully native OS 10 framework based on the legacy of NextStep, offered the most modern features and the tightest integration with the system. QuickTime Java and system-level services like Quartz and OpenGL all played their roles underneath, sitting atop Darwin and the XNU kernel. This structure allowed OS 10 to support a wide range of software, from legacy titles to cutting-edge native apps. Now remember my previous episode where I installed Photoshop 6? Still a classic app running inside the classic environment. No native OS 10 support yet. Photoshop 7 didn't show up until March 2002, but it was at least carbonized, meaning it could run as a native OS 10 app. But here's the catch: it didn't work on macOS 10.0.3, which we updated to last time. You had to be on at least 10.1.3 to get it running properly. So with that in mind, let's roll into the upgrade. I'll show how to start the 10.1 upgrade directly from the CD-ROM. But even though you launch it from within the Finder, the installer won't run in place. It reboots the system into the install environment. The good part, your settings and files remain untouched. After the upgrade, everything's still where you left it. So I now have OS 10 10.1, but I'll need to bring it further. On the Macintosh repository some updates can be sourced, though I had the impression of them being somewhat incomplete. The 10.1.5 upgrade failed right away, and a bit of research turned up that you need to apply some other updates first. Digging through old archived websites, an old Apple help article mentioned some patches and seemed to indicate a specific installation sequence. I did that, however, I observed some installer errors during the process. Also, the machine somehow locked up, so I had to force a reboot, which left me wondering if the machine would come up again. But luckily it did, and reapplying the update a second time then worked. As you probably noticed, contrary to the major system upgrade before, applying these minor patches can be done in service on the running OS. We've actually seen that before when I applied patch upgrades to NextStep 3.3 in an earlier episode. And with that, I can now install Photoshop 7. You'll notice right away it's carbonized as it shows the OS X window decorations. Photoshop would only be fully ported to Cocoa with Photoshop CS5, which was released in April 2010. As mentioned last time, Internet Explorer 5, which was still a preview in OS X 10.0, is now included as the final version in 10.1 and can easily be upgraded to the latest release 5.2.1. And while we had seen Microsoft Office 98 in the previous episode, Microsoft brought out Office 2001 for Mac, which was still built for the classic macOS and released in October 2000. Microsoft then introduced Office Mac VX in November 2001. While it was built on Carbon, it relied on OS X system services and was not compatible with OS 9, even with Carbon lib. At that point, Microsoft still carried a lot of emotional baggage for Mac users. Many remembered the mid-90s investment that arguably kept Apple alive, and to some it felt a bit like dancing with the enemy. But the reaction shifted noticeably into enthusiasm once Microsoft showed off the all-new Entourage Personal Information Manager.
So Mac OS 10.1. Major upgrade. If you're a 10 user, you're going to love this. We are now beyond the early adopters. This is the release that everybody's going to end up using, and we're extremely proud of it. And that's applications. There's already about 1,500 apps shipping for Mac OS X.
While Apple proudly announced the availability of 1,000 native apps for Mac OS X by July 2001, that number had significantly grown again by January 2002. This confirmed how quickly developers embraced OS X within its first year. Apple's decision to provide the Carbon API had fully paid off, and new and innovative apps were arriving on OS X first. Mac OS X 10.1 was warmly received as a huge step forward from the shaky 10.0 release. Many in the Mac community remarked that 10.1 finally made OS X usable day to day. Overall, the media's tone shifted from skepticism to optimism after 10.1's release. Apple had heavily invested not only in optimizing OS X for speed, but also in adding features missing from the first version, leaving even fewer reasons to revert to OS 9. Apple's decision to ship all Macs with Mac OS X 10.1 as the default OS from January 2002 onward furtherly propelled OS X's adoption. By 2002, new iMacs and iBooks also shipped with a bundle of native OS X applications, from big names like Adobe Acrobat Reader 5 and Intuit Quicken, to notable utilities like Lemke Software's Graphic Converter, which we have already seen in our previous episode about the Apple QuickTake 100 camera. Also included were apps from the Omni Group, who had long-standing expertise in developing software for NextStep and OpenStep. Their tools, OmniGraffle and OmniOutliner, were bundled alongside. The Omni Group was also renowned for their Omni web browser, which was originally released for the NextStep platform back in 1995. OmniWeb wasn't bundled, for obvious reasons. Apple had a distribution agreement in place with Microsoft for Internet Explorer. This arrangement was later superseded when Microsoft withdrew from developing Internet Explorer for Unix and Macintosh, and Apple introduced their own Safari browser in 2003, bundled with macOS X 10.3. Meanwhile, while the world focused on macOS X as a desktop operating system, it was also available as a server variant. Originally set to run on ordinary desktop Macs, Apple was quietly working behind the scenes on rack-mount servers, set to release in spring 2002. But what exactly would a Unix-based macOS 10 server platform look like in Apple's hands, and who was it really meant for? Stay tuned for next time. How about you? Which application finally convinced you to switch to OS 10? Or was it a particular Mac? Let me know in the comments below. I'm the Vintage Collector, and this was my story for today. Thanks for watching, and see you again next Sunday.